I'm here today with Katelin Holloway, who is the VP of People and Culture at Reddit. She's one of the most brilliant people operations thinkers that I've met, and I am so excited to be here with you, Katelin, so thank you for taking the time.
What an intro. That's quite an honor. Thank you. You've met a lot of folks.
I have.
Try to meet the bar.
So Reddit is this fascinating company that has dominated the internet over the past sort of 10 years. And one of the things that I find most interesting is that what started as this small community has in the past year erupted into this amazing company. I walked in here and I saw something so different than the Reddit that I saw even just a couple of years ago when I came to the offices. Can you tell me a little bit about first how you came to Reddit and then the story of how Reddit's evolved to become what it is today?
Yeah. My own personal career, I would say I've spent at least half of it trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. There aren't a lot of people you meet in this world that wake up as, college students that say, I want to be an HR lady. That's not a typical path. And so I've literally done everything under the sun in my career. I was in public education. I taught first and second grade in high school. I was in law enforcement for a period of time, advertising. I worked with a number of different hedge funds. And about midway through my career, I woke up one morning and said, I'm fine doing these things, and I'm good at them, but I'm not deeply passionate about them. And so I'm so old that culture was not a word that was used in reference to careers or even organizations. And so I was old school, and I took out my little Venn diagram, and I was like, okay, what do I want? And I listed all of the qualities that I wanted to find in a company and all of the things that I was searching for. And what I ended up coming up with is I wanted to pick a company and an environment to be in versus picking a job. And I figured if I found the right place, a job or a career would reveal itself to me, which was a little bit backwards, and it was a bit of a risk. And so when I mapped out my wants and needs, and did my research, I discovered that I wanted to work for Pixar Animation Studios. This was quite a few years back. Again, I will not date myself, but I applied. I didn't know anybody working there, and it took me 8 months to get in, but I finally did. So I'm a big believer in manifest destiny. I also am the very lucky recipient of being at the right place at the right time. I don't know if it's because of intentionality or because of the stars. I will give it to the universe and let it decide for me. But I've been very, very fortunate to be at the right place at the right time. And so it took me 8 months. I finally was able to get into Pixar. I took a massive pay cut. I took a massive title cut. And I picked a role that would expose me to as many opportunities as I could find. And so typically, those are the folks that are assisting people. You are coordinating or you are assisting others in doing what they do best. So I took a job where I was an assistant to an assistant, and I came in during a very magical time in the company's history. It was during the Disney merger acquisition. And so I was introduced to a lot of great people doing a lot of great things, and I was very fortunate to be in the room during conversations around protecting culture's identity through this transition. So I was exposed to conversations around how workplace design will impact innovation and storytelling, and that impact of having a chef meeting with a producer or a director crossing paths with somebody working in post-production, and how that might change the outcome of a story or might change the outcome of a process internally. Conversations around value set and how internal storytelling and folklore really helps change and develop a group of people.
And it's so fascinating because I think the more HR leaders and people operations leaders that I talk to, the more I hear people coming from backgrounds of product, marketing, storytelling, all these different things, and then ultimately realizing that the thing that they love is helping people. And I think that's really what it comes back down to.
Exactly. I think that was a very pivotal moment in my own career, was when I realized I'm giving away these hats as this company grows, and what I'm left with is HR, and HR does not mean compliance and paperwork and benefit administration. That's a part of the gig, and that's a wonderful part because, as you said, you get to help people. And so what I love most about my job and what I love most about how this industry has developed and changed and evolved over the last several years is really the fact that we care very much about what it is that we do and how we engage with one another. And at the end of the day, it really is about the human experience, because jobs are jobs and companies come and go. You look at resumes and they're a series of brands and timelines, but the reality is that's somebody's life. And it's all of the twists and turns and the right hands in between that say, I had a good experience, I had a good journey.
I've heard that you've told me that when you think about the way that you run people operations, you want to hold yourselves accountable just like any other part of the company who moves the business forward, and that the team should really be an asset to the business. I know you even mentioned that you run product sprints and other things like this. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how you sort of operate the team, how you see your role on the executive team and as part of the company.
So I think that the evolution over even just the last few years has really taken a much more serious approach to HR analytics, people data. Being in Silicon Valley, we have the luxury of being around people who have brilliant minds that can think about things a little differently, and we are allowed and given the space to try to do things better. So while when I speak about people and culture, I light up. I could talk about it all day because I care so deeply about the human experience, and that oftentimes comes off as very soft or shallow, or it's just a feeling. And what happens when the business is not doing well, or what happens when you can't afford to bring in lunches, or what happens if you need to reduce the staff size. To me, that is the real nucleus of culture. Culture is something that happens whether you are intentional about it or not, but being mindful of how you grow it and how you decide to develop it internally as a leadership team, and how the actual team does it, because this is not a top-down experience that we have here. Culture is the who and the how of business, and it's how groups of people, communities come together and try to achieve missions and their vision. And so if you are not driving that with business initiatives, with the goals of the company in mind, you're actually marginalizing your own experience and your own impact on the company. So, like I said, I speak about people very warmly because that's how I feel about them. But the reality is behind the curtain. We run a very, very tight ship here at Reddit. We are very metrics driven. We are very committed to, we have big goals and we have big dreams, and to achieve our vision and our mission, we have to make sure that we have rigor behind the feel goods. So I tell my team on the first day, when anyone walks through our doors, from the second we meet them and we're recruiting them to the day that they tell us their cup is full and it's time for them to move on, that it's our job to make sure they have the best possible experience they can have. We align with the product and engineering sprint roadmaps. We run 2-week sprints with deliverables that we are held accountable for. We make them transparent to the company so that the team knows exactly how it is that we are prioritizing their needs and our initiatives. We also run quarterly engagement surveys so that we can use that as a leading indicator or X-ray for the initiatives and programs that we'd like to implement. It's a very well-oiled machine, but yes, we do our best to align so that at the end of the day, we are giving the greatest experience we possibly can, and if we do things well, it's the company's success at the end of the day. People want to be a part of something that is winning and that is doing good in the world.
And hearing you talk about that balance between, you want this to be a place that people love, people talk about, Reddit as a place that's, more to them than just a company, of course, but at the same time, you're a business and you need to, achieve these really big things together. Maybe then the goal isn't, it's not all about niceness and happiness, but maybe to some degree it's about sort of fairness and expectations and these kind of things. And so I wonder how you sort of strike that balance in terms of bringing both of those together into the culture.
At the end of the day, one of the common denominators, though, for a great experience or having a great journey with a company, like I said, is really being a part of something that is successful. And so understanding what it takes to be successful, what that definition is for the company, like I said, by tracking and measuring OKRs and having alignment across the board around what it is that you want to achieve and what success looks and feels like, celebrating your wins together, but also mourning losses. So culture is not just puppy dogs and lollipops. That's the good stuff on a good day. But like I said, the real culture is when maybe you're not doing so well and you have to make hard decisions. And so when you need to make hard decisions, the first thing you do is push them through your values filter. But it's not just a poster on a wall. They really are a tool and a vehicle for the company and the staff to understand how decisions are made, and also to be able to be empowered to make decisions on their own, what's best for the company. So for example, here at Reddit, one of our top values is evolve. And we're a 12-year-old company that's been through a lot of change, and also not a lot of change in certain areas. And so for the leadership team to say our number one value is evolve, that means that every single team member here can adjust and adapt and focus on making sure that we are evolving our product and our platform and our company to be better than it was yesterday. So in order to do that, like I said, to make hard decisions, the first thing you do is you push them through the values filter. And the second thing is people need to know that everything is done with equity and fairness in mind. And so the only way you can do that is transparency and metrics, data, data, data. So yeah, I think that there are ways in which you can have conversations, and the ways in which you share information with the company, the way in which you solicit feedback and give feedback, all of those things tie together. But at the end of the day, it's all about managing expectations. If people know what to expect, they're going to have a better experience than if you surprise them.
And I particularly love your insight that being part of something that's growing and succeeding is one of the most important things in the long term for someone to be happy in their role. And so making short-term trade-offs towards that end really fits in with sort of the idea that I think we've been seeing, that people ops is really a part of driving the business forward. So I think that's really powerful. I want to transition a little bit to sort of the notion of feedback and the culture of feedback. Mm-hmm. I think we talked before once about the importance of trust in terms of feedback and the way that people are able to get that feedback. How do you have a culture where people do correct each other's mistakes or tell them whether they're doing well? How do you ensure that people are giving each other that feedback, are doing a good job about it, and are doing it with some sort of consistency that you want?
I will tell you that I think that that's one of the biggest challenges that most companies will come and share if they are being honest. It's a conversation that happens in my peer group between companies in the Valley. No one has quite gotten this right. And the reality is because we're humans, and humans are very messy. And you should create frameworks to have and enable people to have the right conversations. But you also need to be very mindful that there are people on the receiving end, both giving and receiving. And so there are some best practices and things that we here at Reddit certainly adhere to. But I will send the call and the challenge out. If anyone has solved this, please share it with the world, because it's across any organization, not just in Silicon Valley. Feedback, I think, is a very, very hard thing. Relationships, all of them, whether they are work or personal, government, any of them, relationships are hard. But the lack of communication is the thing that will make it fail every single time. So using tools and creating opportunities for your team to have continuous feedback, whether it's around the prioritization of their goals, or if it's how people are experiencing their colleagues, or feedback on something that they have just accomplished or achieved, good, bad, or otherwise. So here at Reddit, we actually use Lattice as a vehicle to help us get to that place. I'm a really big fan of the weekly check-ins. So for me and my team, we're moving fast. We span the entire org. It's not like we have one micro focus, but because we're dealing with the whole organization, being able to check in with my team frequently and have a consistent time and a space to say, I know that I'm going to have an opportunity to ask Katrina how she is doing this week, and I know for a fact that there's going to be at minimum once a week, a space for her to tell me and give me feedback on how I can best serve her and support her. So at minimum, you should have frameworks and tools in place so that you have a guaranteed, expected opportunity for dialogue. And then you just really have to create the culture of it. So in this case, feedback typically runs top down. So if you have a leadership team that is transparent, that often gives feedback and is very open to receiving feedback, you will elicit that within your culture. That's something that's really hard to manufacture, because like I said, people are just naturally inclined or not to do this.
Definitely. And I think one of the other challenges is often when people give feedback, they don't know whether they're doing it necessarily at that time for the benefit of the person they're giving the feedback to, or for the purposes of evaluating them next to their peers. Right. I think so often these conversations get muddled. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's a good way to separate out these two very important conversations, one on the sort of development side, one sort of on the evaluation side. I think people naturally sort of desire both.
Right.
Is there an answer to this?
Here in our company, we've actually done some split tracking with those. We take them in two different formats for the conversation. We, of course, have standardized performance review cycles, and that is much more around a retrospective of what was done in that performance review cycle, and actually mapping it to a career ladder and a career map to say, I know that your goal is to be X in X period of time. Based on our career ladders, you are achieving X, Y, and Z. I think that we could improve in X areas X, Y, and Z. How do you feel about this? And then it's a conversation about career development, and it's much more independent of the company and more focused on the individual. We want them to be successful wherever they go. What's good for them is good for us. Of course, we want them to be successful internally, but the development and feedback as it relates to interaction with peers, with the initiatives or projects they're working on are much more live and in the moment. So we have weekly one-on-ones with our team members that are a little bit more casual and are like I said, feedback needs to be timely. That's one of the most critical components. And so, waiting 3 months or 6 months or whenever your performance review cycle is, typically is ineffective.
What are we talking about again?
Yes, or why are you bringing that up? Why'd you hold a grudge?
Yeah, exactly.
The conversation becomes very, very different.
Yes.
So if we focus our performance reviews more on career development and general broad sweeps of trends or patterns, and then looking forward how we can be better, and then the continuous feedback cycle on a weekly basis or bi-weekly or whatever is right for your organization.
And another important and I think somewhat related topic that people think a lot about, but I don't think there's a lot of great information out there about, is the topic of compensation. It's definitely one of the realities of running a business. It's very hard. It's hard to know what's out there. It's hard to know what's right. It's hard to know what's fair. What are some principles that guide you when you think about compensation, either in terms of new hires? I know you guys are hiring up a storm here this year, and I know that's going to be an exciting process for you, but also your existing employees who are here. How do you think about compensation for these people?
Our philosophy is really to make compensation not a conversation. And the only way you make it not a conversation is to make it transparent, fair, and generous. So, like I said, compensation is a conversation that's happening throughout the industry because no one has quite gotten it right. It's typically very opaque. It's typically very personal, whether it is the person having to negotiate or not on their own behalf, and then whatever the organization decides. And it's also typically run through one filter, which is the person's direct manager. Like I said, for one, we want to make it as transparent as possible. So for us, we created salary and equity bands that are static. We have done our market research. We pull from a number of different sources that are shared throughout our industry for the size and the space that we are in our growth cycle. So our bands are set as they are. We make all of our offers at that band. There is no plus or minus. And then when people actually do come in and they are progressing here, they know that every performance review cycle, we have 3 opportunities for people to get a comp adjustment. There is the what we call the make it right, which is adjusting to market. There is the make it rain, which is the merit award. So you've done well and you're progressing up through your band to the next level. And then there's the promotion, which means that you've made it up to the bottom of your next band. So you're progressing through your career ladder. It's a very algorithmic process, which I love because money is usually tied to emotion, and that is a very slippery slope. By having a framework that allows us to tell our entire staff, this is how you will be compensated, and know that we are going to pay you fairly to market. The last thing I want is for my team members to be distracted by recruiter emails, coming in from other companies to poach them. So I want to make sure that things are fair. I want to make sure that things are transparent so people know how we award them. And then also, more importantly, I want to make sure that they are taken care of. And so from the benefits package to the opportunity to join a company, that's the whole tech thing, is you get a stake in the actual company. So the stock options, and then your actual base salary and any incentive pay that's associated.
And one other piece there, I noticed you were talking quite a bit about salary. In Silicon Valley, people talk so much about equity as well, and giving people a stake in the company and making them feel like owners. The reality is, I think a lot of times people do live in an expensive city and they need to make certain trade-offs. What do you see? How do you think about the kind of cash versus equity piece of it? Do you try to be very clear with employees about what the equity is, what it means. Is there a philosophy that you have around that?
Absolutely. I think equity is a critical component of a compensation package. It is very difficult to talk about. Oftentimes there are pieces of information that are speculative, and that is very, very hard for me to put a flag in the sand and say it's going to be valued at exactly X. So while it is important, and I want people to come to Reddit because they believe in what it is that we're doing, and they believe in our mission, and to do that, I want to make sure that they are invested in the right way and truly feel like an owner, because they are. It is hard to put a number on those things. So that's a less tangible piece, but because of that, you actually see the market data shift, because folks have been in that have been in tech for the last 10 years, they maybe have been burned on a few companies by now. And so what I'm seeing in the market trend right now, and this is not a Katelin philosophy or a Reddit philosophy, but just simply the market trend, is that you are seeing base salaries go up and incentive pay go up and equity shareholdership going down. So
Totally.
equity is an important piece of compensation, but it is hard to give a value.
Another piece around compensation that, what you mentioned brought up to me is, I think oftentimes, and maybe you guys have figured out a better answer to this, I think negotiation plays such a strong role in what the final compensation someone gets, either the negotiation pre-hire or people negotiating for a raise while they're there. And one of the things I can't help but notice is that biases towards people who negotiate more strongly, which there's often a gender divide on that. And that seems incredibly unfair to me in a world where we want people to be paid based off merit, but the aggression of your negotiation has a real impact on your salary. How do you address that? Is that a real problem? Is that something you think about?
It is something I think about a lot. One, being a woman who is not good at negotiating, I have always had this challenge and have always sought a solution to that. So I've done my personal homework. I've gone to see talks by women, for women, how to be a better negotiator. I've read all of the business insider books and the Harvard Business Review articles on it. I've done it all, and the reality is I'm just not very good at it, and I don't know that I care to be very good at it. One of the things I loved about my personal recruiting process here when I was brought into the company was I was asked what my salary expectations were. I said it, and it was a very uncomfortable conversation for me. I can't even tell the story without being uncomfortable. It's that uncomfortable for me. I stated my salary expectations, did not receive a response, but then when I actually received my offer, it was actually 20% higher than my salary expectations. And I was floored, and I was like, okay, so what do you know that I don't? I'm not going to say no thank you. I'm certainly not going to turn this away, but now I'm a little curious. Is the job bigger than I thought? Is there a secret? And Steve was very candid with me, and he said, no, we actually have bands, and we pay exactly to market, and we feel that this is what you're worth, and this is what we would have paid anybody coming in for this role. That immediately changed my personal experience. I was very, very grateful to be coming into a place that valued everybody equally. And to be honest, that was something I hadn't seen before. And so when I came in and started asking Steve about his compensation philosophies and the strategy that we had here, we were able to develop it together. And what I discovered was the entire leadership team felt the same way. And so we actually have a no negotiation policy. It feels really good. By having a non-negotiation policy and knowing that we are paying very, very fair to market feels really good. And we actually do a survey after folks come in on their recruiting experience, and it is 9 times out of 10 noted by underrepresented classes.
How do you think about, I know you mentioned pay them fairly and be part of something that's growing. What are some of the other factors that matter the most in terms of keeping your employees happy and making them want to stay at Reddit for a long time? You do all this investing into recruiting and training and onboarding and development. How do you then keep these people? What goes into that?
I have this this theory. It's called the convergence of desire, and there are two two axes. One is what the company needs. You know, we have a role we need done because we have a goal that we're trying to achieve. The other is the employee or the person who is going to do that task for you or have the skill set that you need to achieve your goals. And that person also has needs and wants and desires. And so when those two things align, that point of intersection, that's the convergence of desire. That is where the company is the happiest and the person is the happiest. Those two things are constantly in flux and changing. So I view my team's role as in partnership with our managers and the leadership team, making sure that we are constantly on top of where and how those two axes are moving. That sounds a little bit more algorithmic than I want it to, but the reality is it's having a dialogue with your team and understanding what it is that they need. Everyone's going to need different things at different times, and understanding what those are as a collective, as a community, as a culture, is our job. And so at different times it may be that the team maybe, let's say we launched something and it was a huge success, and it was being able to note and memorialize the successes together. Like I said, celebrating your wins is really important, and creating rituals around those things are those are the things that tie people to a company, where they look back and say, oh gosh, those were the good old days. I want to make the good old days today. Now and today and every day. Similarly, and when things don't go well, those are how you manage those and the rituals that you have when you go into mourning losses, or when something doesn't go as expected, and the conversations you have around that. At the end of the day, it's about relationships and finding connections between people and connecting them to putting good back into the world, because for most of us, and I will not make this a blanket statement, but for most of us, we want to feel like we have done something with the time we have here. And being able to do it with people that you care deeply about and you respect, and have high integrity, all of those like normal human checklist bits of how we'd like to engage with one another and whom we'd like to engage with, that's our job. That's it. I have the best job on earth. I truly do. And so coming in and being able to help these people create shared memories together, and really change the way the world interacts with one another on our platform and the communities that we build outside of these four walls is deeply powerful. And so being able to do that and do it gracefully in a world where business objectives change and people are coming and going, and the world is evolving with us and around us, and the way the conversations are happening here and outside and on our platform, that dynamic is fascinating and very rewarding.
I love that, and it sounds like there's a good convergence between what you want and what Reddit wants, so sounds like that works well.
Absolutely.
Okay, my last thought, if you could give a piece of advice to somebody coming into people operations, they think they love it, they're maybe new to it, what advice do you have for them to be successful in a career in people operations? Listen.
Be a part of what it is that is being built around you. Like I said, culture happens whether you are intentional about it or not. You cannot come into something and immediately enforce change or try to enact change. Understand what the needs of the organism is, understand, talk, and really hear what it is telling you, both vocally and passively, in the feeling and the dialogue of the group of people. Like I said, every company and every culture is very different, but the more you listen, the more you will learn, and you will be able to help create and pave the right pathway for success and for a lovely, thriving culture.
That's great. Katelin, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you. This was fun.